How Better Call Saul improved Saul Goodman. Within television, it's extremely rare for a show to be able to replicate the success of its predecessor as the spin-off to an award-winning, much-loved show that spans several years. However, with Better Call Saul, it managed to replicate the success of Breaking Bad, but not only survive by living in its shadow, it formed its own identity and stood in its own right without the need of association to give it all that it needed to survive. And most of that was due to the character Saul Goodman. Within this video, I'm going to be breaking down why I believe Saul Goodman contributed to the extreme critical success of the show, how it built upon the character from what we saw in Breaking Bad, and how he went from somebody who was relatively two-dimensional to a fully fleshed out individual that we cared for, rooted for, and felt like we knew. So let's get into it. Here is how Better Call Saul improved Saul Goodman. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Better Call Saul had a tall order when it first arrived on our screens, but it didn't take long for the character that we were acquainted with from 4 seasons of Breaking Bad to come into his own, allow us to see all that he did prior to the world of Breaking Bad, and see how he ended up like he did. This was something that was vital for the character in order for the show to have a successful run. Within Breaking Bad, Saul Goodman, whilst he was more than a recurring character in the show and he had a large involvement in the business that Walt and Jesse were carrying out and would be their go-to man when they would get themselves into troubling situations, we only ever really saw him at his office dealing with the issues that were present, and it's only until reflecting on Breaking Bad you realize that he was just a bit of a mystery. We never really knew Jimmy McGill. We only ever acquainted ourselves with Saul, and behind the face that was Saul Goodman was a broken-hearted man that had been through far more than we could have ever imagined, containing loss of loved ones, responsibility, and the yearning to forget a past that had dealt him a bad card, and instead wanted to be the humorous yet cunning and intelligent Saul Goodman. I'm going to break this video down by the main talking points that I feel contribute to the character, the humanizing of the character. Saul Goodman in Breaking Bad was a character who we only really saw the surface level of. The most we got from him in terms of panic, fear, or exaggerated emotions was when he was fearful towards the back end of Breaking Bad, where his own involvement with Walter White and his empire was going to come crashing down on him as well. So much so that he had to use the very thing that he said was there for the protection of Walt, the vacuum repair service. Whilst we didn't get to see what occurred when they spent 24 hours with each other, we did get to see it in the final season of Better Call Saul, and we saw how even many years after the events of the past, he was still compressing everything down so that he didn't have to address it, most poignantly stated when Walt questioned, "So you've always been like that?" when we knew deep down he hadn't been. He'd suppressed the hurt from the loss of his brother, the heartbreak he experienced from losing Kim, and leaned fully into the Saul Goodman that we only really came to see being born during Better Call Saul as life happened. Somebody who was prepared to screw somebody over to benefit himself. What Better Call Saul did with the character when compared to Breaking Bad was they allowed the show to be about him. It's obvious, right? We don't learn much about Saul in Breaking Bad because the show isn't about him. But by giving us 6 seasons worth of a backstory to a character that seemed relatively empty and insincere, provided reasons as to why we were seeing him behave like what he did in the future in Breaking Bad, almost like it was actually devised before the show even aired. Within Breaking Bad, we saw Saul interact with individuals such as Francesca, Huell, Walt, Jesse, Hank, and Skyler, along with other brief engagements. There wasn't much human interaction that showcased the character's true emotions, behaviors, and intentions. What Better Call Saul did was they introduced us to everybody that had ever played a large role in his life. For example, his brother Chuck, his lover Kim, his rival Howard Hamlin, and his maker Lalo Salamanca. Each of these individuals brought something completely different out of Jimmy, and each of them impacted him in the end in a completely different way. Chuck's death, Kim abandoning him yet returning, Howard being killed in front of his eyes, and then the eventual mental haunting from Lalo Salamanca. In Breaking Bad, we even heard him mention Lalo, showing that several years later it was something that had been on his mind and there was never really a sense of safety in his life from the events that occurred in Better Call Saul. By seeing Jimmy interact with the people that he cared about, he feared and felt passionate about, we got to see the true person that was behind the facade and also understand how he got to that point in Breaking Bad. He had turbulent relationships, stared death in the face long before the days of Walter White going on a ride along with Hank, so by burdening all of this, it changed his perspective and the weight of all that he'd been through was sitting on his shoulders. It made sense for the reason as to why we were seeing him behave like what he was in Breaking Bad, but we just didn't know it at that point. Saul Goodman is human, with real emotions, and he feels the same as you and I. Breaking Bad doesn't really tell us or show us that, but Better Call Saul certainly did. The Arc of Redemption. The Arc of Redemption was something that I thought improved the character of Saul Goodman drastically. In Breaking Bad, Saul Goodman never apologized and he never really went back on his word. But by the end of the prequel, we'd seen all that had occurred with him post-Breaking Bad where he was Gene Tarkovic. But we saw the slip in Jimmy and Saul Goodman of the past gradually starting to bring itself back in, as along with Jeff, he was doing anything to make a quick buck. Almost like he was getting a buzz from it after hiding for so long. But this time it was worse. It felt like he was genuinely turning into Walter White and adopting that mindset where he didn't care about the collateral damage or the people he was doing wrong to. Once he was eventually caught and his journey was coming to an end, we saw him use all of the skills that he'd acquired over the years to get himself an extremely short sentence where he was proud of it, giving us the final showcase of his lawyer abilities. However, in the closing moments of the final episode, we saw him take the stand in front of the judge, and we saw him go back to James McGill. He even asked to be referred to as that, and he admitted his involvement in Walter White's empire and was prepared to face all of his other demons. This in turn mirrored scenes from the past, it tied into the entirety of the character's growth, development and journey, and we saw him go full circle and admit a somewhat defeat. However, he was honest, so it wasn't really a defeat. All of those feelings that we saw him suppressing in Breaking Bad, all that he'd taken on as a burden from the prequel in Better Call Saul, he released. And despite being physically contained and incarcerated in prison, mentally he was free. Free of all that had tied him down for many years and morphed him into Saul Goodman. The Saul Goodman of Breaking Bad wouldn't have done this. In fact, he didn't. He ran away. But this one faced it head on. Saul Goodman is a character like no other in television history. What started as a two-dimensional creation devised for the purpose of providing some slight comic relief intertwined with witty, cunning behavior and sleazy professionalism, turned into one of the most well-thought-out backstories to a life that we got to see unfold on screen over the course of 11 seasons of 2 shows, covering his past, present and future. If Better Call Saul was never created, would we still be talking about Saul Goodman? No, probably not. I'd be doing a video on Walter White. But the Saul that was left on the page in 2013 and the one that was left for a second time in 2022 are 2 different sides to the same being, and it's magical to see how one impacted the other. It's a journey that I felt privileged to be able to watch on screen, and I also yearn to see unfold in another show again. So until that day, Saul Goodman is the perfect example of it. So, there you have it, how Better Call Saul improved Saul Goodman. If you want to see more videos such as Endings Explained, theories and predictions and character breakdowns, then click on the I button, or alternatively you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. If you'd like to give me a show or movie that you'd like me to review, then head over to my Twitter, @brainpilot_, and tweet me what show or movie you'd like me to review next. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rate the latest movies that don't quite make the cut to getting a dedicated video, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. What was your favourite season of Better Call Saul? Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.